They called it a miracle at first, a tactical impossibility, a skirmish so one-sided that historians dismissed the reports as human propaganda. But the records are clear, preserved in layers of encrypted battlefield transmissions, satellite telemetry, and the final unfiltered audio logs of the Zeran Dominion War Council. This is not myth. This is not legend. This is the day the galaxy learned that human willpower can cut deeper than any blade, pierce stronger than any bullet, and strike harder than any weapon forged in 1,000 star systems. It was not the strength of their fleets that shattered the Dominion. It was something invisible, something unquantifiable, something that refuses to die even when everything else does. It began on a nameless moon orbiting the fractured gas giant of Zynar 3. A frozen wasteland, strategically irrelevant, but rich in one resource no algorithm could measure: desperation. According to the Dominion's predictive models, the colony stationed there was insignificant. 352 humans. No orbital defense platforms. A fleet of 5,000 enemy soldiers would descend, crush resistance in less than 9 minutes, and move on. It was supposed to be over before the first scream. And yet, this moon became a graveyard of an empire. The first signals intercepted from the human colony are chillingly ordinary. A distress beacon, a few clipped words, static, a commander's voice, calm, too calm. It is the kind of phrase countless species have spoken before falling, but with humans, those words do not end a story. They start one. Data recovered from Dominion war logs shows their landing craft entering the lower atmosphere at 04:17 local time. Zero resistance. Dominion commanders believed the enemy was already surrendering. According to later testimony, one of their officers even joked, "This will be over before breakfast." He was wrong. What no one outside the colony could see was the silent preparation underway beneath the surface. Not the kind of preparation that involves advanced technology, but something older, simpler, and far more terrifying: the decision to fight to the last breath. In the Dominion's war doctrine, morale is a measurable resource. It depletes like ammunition. Their simulations predict surrender rates with terrifying accuracy. But human willpower does not behave like a number in an equation. When everything logical tells them to break, they dig in. When their bodies fail, their minds begin to burn hotter. It is not rational, and it is why they are feared. At 04:28, the Dominion ground assault began. 5,000 soldiers, 73 mechanized units, a line of steel that has crushed dozens of star systems. The colony did not meet them on the surface. They let the invaders come closer. Then the first explosion tore through the landing zone. It was not a targeted strike. It was a controlled collapse. The humans had mined their own infrastructure. They were willing to burn everything they built, everything they loved, to deny the enemy a single inch of safe ground. The Dominion War Council described it as strategic madness. In human terms, it was willpower weaponized. One by one, landing ships went up in flames. Barracks they had constructed with their own hands were reduced to molten steel. Civilians carried fuel canisters. Children helped dig tunnels. No one was a bystander. In their final transmission, a mechanic whispered, "If they want this place, they will have to take it from our bones." That sentence became infamous across the sector. They still had the numbers, the armor, the overwhelming technological advantage. But something began to shift. What they expected to be a clean victory became a nightmare of smoke and blood. Telemetry shows that the human defenders fought without centralized command after the first hour. Their captain was killed in the opening salvo. Yet resistance did not falter. It grew stronger, decentralized. Every building they lost became a trap. Every corridor they collapsed created a choke point. And when they had nothing left to defend, they fought from the tunnels below. Survivors from Dominion squads later testified that it felt less like fighting an army and more like fighting the planet itself. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, emerging from smoke, from rubble, from places no rational soldier would stand their ground. One of the Dominion lieutenants reported seeing a wounded woman, barely able to hold a rifle, crawl into the open just to ignite a fuel line with her last breath. She burned, and so did 3 armored vehicles. At 06:14, a full 2 hours after the expected surrender time, Dominion commanders began to panic. They requested orbital bombardment clearance. It was denied. The Emperor's standing order was clear. This moon was to be captured intact. Dominion soldiers were ordered to push on. That decision would cost them everything. Inside the colony, a shift happened. The humans no longer believed they could survive, but they believed they could make their deaths count. This is the point where most species break. This is the point where humans become monsters. Data shows that in the last hour of combat, resistance intensified despite catastrophic casualties. Psychological warfare, improvised traps, suicidal charges, everything that doctrine says should not work, worked. The Dominion's combat AI failed to adapt. It had no protocol for enemies who treated pain as fuel. No calculation for enemies who considered death not a threat, but a tool. The logs record officers screaming over comms, begging for extraction. One voice in particular stands out. Lieutenant Kexar of the 3rd Dominion Wing. "They do not die right," he said. "They do not die right." He repeated that phrase 7 times before his transmission was cut off. By 08:43, the battlefield had changed hands. A force of 5,000 trained Dominion soldiers reduced to less than 400. 352 humans reduced to 39 breathing bodies. And yet, they won. Not because they had better weapons, not because they had better technology, because they refused to stop. When the first outside recon ship arrived, the surface was still burning. There were no fortresses, no defensive grid, just ruins, ash, and a silence so heavy it felt like gravity itself had thickened. But beneath that silence, something impossible pulsed. 39 survivors. Each one injured, each one still holding their weapon. Not one of them surrendered. Their leader was gone. Their families were gone. And yet, when the recon ship's captain asked who was in charge, one of the wounded answered, "We are." This moment became a case study in every military academy across the spiral arm. The Dominion called it an anomaly. Humans called it Tuesday. What makes this event so horrifying to outside observers is not just the scale of the destruction. It is the mindset behind it. Humans do not fight like they expect to win. They fight like they must win. They build their willpower into the structure of their resistance. And once it ignites, it does not dim when hope dies. It burns brighter. This is why Dominion commanders began to fear small human colonies more than entire fleets. Not because they were powerful, but because they were unpredictable. Willpower cannot be hacked. It cannot be suppressed by firepower. It cannot be broken by statistics. And it cannot be defeated by logic. In the aftermath of Zynar 3, entire war doctrines were rewritten. Dominion assault strategies were restructured. They introduced new psychological warfare programs specifically designed to target human morale. They failed. No simulation, no weapon, no threat worked the way they expected. They did not understand that when humans are cornered, when they have nothing left to lose, they become more dangerous, not less. This is the first time the galaxy began to whisper the phrase that would echo for generations. Human willpower is deadlier than any weapon. And as the Dominion licked its wounds, they began to fear something they had never feared before. Not a fleet, not a superweapon, but a single human standing alone against an empire. The Dominion did not understand what happened on Zynar 3. Empires built on numbers rarely do. Their entire war machine relied on predictability. Numbers, charts, projected casualty ratios, and clean victory timelines. Every species they had conquered before followed the same pattern: overwhelming force, rapid demoralization, quick surrender. And for centuries, that worked flawlessly. Then came humans. The news of their defeat spread like cracks through a flawless mirror. It was not supposed to be possible. A tiny colony with no heavy artillery had shredded a professional army like paper. Dominion officers tried to bury the reports, but soldiers talk. Survivors talk louder. And fear, once born, does not die easily. In the weeks that followed, the Dominion initiated what they called Operation Silence, an organized campaign to rewrite the events of Xynar 3. Officially, the incident was labeled tactical mismanagement. The War Council blamed weather interference, communication delays, terrain miscalculations, and everything except the one thing they could not face. They had been broken by willpower. Meanwhile, the humans did not celebrate. There were no parades, no songs, no medals. The survivors of Xynar 3 returned to their fleet in silence, carrying with them the ashes of their homes and the unspoken understanding that something fundamental had changed. They did not just win a battle, they proved a point, and every soldier in the Dominion knew it. 3 weeks later, the Dominion sent a fleet to another human colony, larger, better defended, a mining outpost on the edge of the Helix Rift. They believed that Xynar 3 was a statistical anomaly, that if they crushed the next target with overwhelming force, they could erase the memory of their humiliation. They were wrong again. The humans knew they were coming this time. They did not build fortresses. They built something worse. They built resolve. Entire families volunteered to stay behind, fully aware that reinforcements would never arrive in time. Engineers flooded tunnels with accelerants. Miners collapsed their own shafts to create death traps. Medical units trained civilians to fight, to carry, to burn. And when the Dominion arrived, 15,000 strong, they met not fear, but silence. The silence of a people who have already decided they will not lose. The first wave of Dominion soldiers encountered no resistance at the perimeter. No gunfire, no movement, just empty streets and eerie stillness. Then, like a fuse being lit, the colony ignited from within. Explosions erupted beneath their feet. Trenches they thought were abandoned turned into fiery graves. Civilians, farmers, workers, children emerged from smoke, throwing grenades with the precision of soldiers. Dominion commanders screamed for order, but there was no order to impose. The battlefield had dissolved into chaos, not chaos born of panic, chaos born of human strategy. The Dominion had numbers. Humans had fury. One captured Dominion soldier described it later. We landed on a colony. We thought they were prey, but they stared at us like executioners. That was the second blow to the Dominion's pride. The humans didn't just resist, they did it again. This was not a lucky victory. This was a pattern, and that terrified the Dominion War Council more than any weapon could have. They assembled their top strategists, mathematicians, psychologists, behavior analysts. They dissected human history line by line, war by war, and what they found disturbed them to their core. Humans had fought wars when outnumbered. They had waged rebellions without weapons. They had survived genocides, planetary disasters, and centuries of their own brutality. Every time they should have broken. Every time they did not. The Dominion's supreme strategist, Zelor Van, wrote in a classified memo later leaked to the outer systems, "Humans are not a military problem. They are a psychological contagion. They infect every war they enter with belief. Belief is not quantifiable. Belief does not surrender." This memo caused panic at the highest levels. Not because it was wrong, because it was right. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Dominion paused. They had conquered over 100 species without resistance lasting more than months. But with humans, their projection stretched into decades. They realized they were not facing an army. They were facing a mindset, so they changed their approach. The Dominion decided to break humans before they fought. If brute force could not shatter their will, maybe fear could. They started targeting communications, hacking human networks, spreading messages of despair. They flooded colonies with psychological warfare, fake surrender messages, broadcasts of fabricated defeats. voice mimics of commanders begging them to give up. It worked on other species, but not on humans. Humans have a peculiar relationship with fear. It does not dissolve their will. It sharpens it. The more the Dominion tried to frighten them, the more tightly they clenched their fists. Entire communities began painting slogans on their walls. We do not bow. Fear is not a weapon. If they come, they will bleed. The Dominion could not compute this. Their simulations showed morale breaking after 40 days of continuous pressure. Instead, human colonies were recruiting more volunteers. What was supposed to be a psychological attack became free propaganda for the resistance. Then came the Helix Rift massacre. A Dominion fleet of 30,000 soldiers landed on the Helix mining colony after weeks of psychological bombardment. They expected to find a shattered, exhausted population. Instead, they found 35,000 human civilians ready to fight to the death. For 3 straight days, the Dominion advanced and the humans refused to retreat. No battle formation, no elegant tactics, just stubborn, unrelenting will. Entire families died together rather than surrender. Engineers welded their own hands to artillery guns so no one could take them away. Mothers set off charges with their children in their arms. Not one soldier defected. By the 4th day, Dominion morale began to crack. Officers who once mocked humans as primitive began whispering about them in terrified tones. They are not soldiers, one said. They are storms in human form. It was the first time in recorded Dominion history that their soldiers tried to retreat without orders. The Helix Rift battle ended in fire. The Dominion technically won. They took the colony, but their casualties were catastrophic. Over 20,000 dead. They won a piece of land, but lost something they did not understand how to rebuild: confidence and the humans. The humans lost everything, but they gained something priceless. They became myth. Whispers spread through the Dominion's ranks. They do not surrender. They are already dead before the battle begins. They fight like they want you to remember their names. Dominion. War planners realized they were fighting an enemy that could not be defeated the way others had been, so they escalated again. They unleashed a new kind of warfare. Orbital strikes on civilian zones, starvation blockades, blackouts. But humanity has always been forged in hardship. Blockades created famine. Famine created anger. And anger gave birth to movements. Human colonies linked together, united not by political alliances but by shared defiance. They began to fight not as soldiers but as a species. The Dominion struck a world. Humanity answered with 10 more uprisings. They bombarded 1 colony. Humans sent 3 sabotage teams into Dominion space. Every atrocity fed the fire. Every punishment made them more dangerous. By the 5th year of the war, the Dominion had the larger fleet, the stronger economy, and the sharper blades. But they no longer believed in victory. The humans did. A captured Dominion general confessed under tribunal, "We can crush their bones, but not their will. And bones do not kill us. Will does." The turning point came at the Battle of Ashfall Ridge. The Dominion deployed its most fearsome weapon, the Starbreaker cannon, capable of vaporizing entire mountain ranges. They aimed it at the last major human fortress in the sector, Ashfall. Their intelligence told them the humans would surrender the moment the cannon was charged. Instead, the humans moved closer. Thousands of civilians abandoned safe shelters and marched toward the fortress walls to stand beside the soldiers. They did not carry shields. They carried torches, banners, old rifles, knives, and anything that could kill if swung hard enough. When the Dominion commander saw the gathering through his viewport, he reportedly asked, "Why are they not hiding?" The human reply was broadcast on every open channel. "Because you cannot kill us all. You can only try." That sentence froze the Dominion fleet. The cannon fired. Ashfall Ridge vanished in light. A crater hundreds of meters deep swallowed the fortress whole. And yet, when the dust cleared, human soldiers were still charging through the smoke. Bodies burning, lungs seared, but eyes locked forward. That night the Dominion fleet withdrew. They had killed thousands, but they had broken nothing. A Dominion historian later wrote, "They fight with the quiet madness of a species that has already buried itself 1,000 times. They are not trying to live. They are trying to make their deaths cost everything. By the 6th year of the war, entire Dominion battalions began to defect, not to join the humans, but to escape fighting them. Veteran soldiers whispered that facing humans was a death sentence wrapped in flesh, and the humans, they grew more united, more focused, more dangerous, because when willpower spreads, it becomes contagious. Their resistance became more than war. It became belief, and belief, when sharpened by pain, is sharper than any blade. The Dominion's War Council sat in silence. The once unstoppable empire now found itself standing on the edge of something it had never faced before. Doubt. Empires do not fall because they run out of soldiers. Empires fall when their soldiers stop believing they can win. And that is exactly what humanity had done, not by destroying fleets or burning cities, but by infecting the Dominion with hopelessness. Their fleets were still massive. Their armies still outnumbered humanity 100 to 1. But every soldier sent to the front carried the same unshakable dread, the knowledge that humans would not break. And that meant every battle would cost too much, hurt too much, burn too long. In war, numbers matter. But will decides who stays standing. The Dominion tried one last time to reclaim their illusion of control. They gathered their strongest fleet, the Crimson Armada, a monstrous collection of dreadnoughts, siege carriers, and war barges. It was a hammer designed to crush not armies but entire civilizations. The plan was simple. They would descend upon humanity's largest stronghold, Erebus Bastion, and end the war in one cataclysmic blow. If they could burn Erebus to ash, the resistance would lose its heart. But the Dominion made a fatal miscalculation. They thought humans had a heart. They did not understand that every human was the heart. When the Dominion fleet emerged from warp space above Erebus, they expected panic, evacuations, broadcasts begging for mercy. Instead, the entire planet had gone dark. No transmissions, no cries, no fear. What they did not know was that beneath the surface of Erebus, millions of humans, soldiers, farmers, workers, children, had made their decision long before the battle began. They would not run, they would not hide, they would not surrender. They would stand. The Dominion fired the first orbital barrage. The night sky lit up like the birth of a star. Entire mountain ranges split open under the assault. The ground shook. Cities turned to molten rivers of steel and stone. But from the smoke, the humans rose, blackened, bleeding, furious, and they charged. Their ground forces launched a counteroffensive so brutal it stunned the Dominion's front line. Tanks emerged from underground hangars. Artillery batteries hidden beneath entire cities came online in a single synchronized heartbeat. Civilians became medics, miners became snipers. Every road, every bridge, every corridor became a battlefield. The Dominion's ships rained fire. Humans answered with will. A Dominion pilot later said during interrogation, "It felt like fighting a storm that didn't care it was dying. We killed them, and they kept coming. We burned their cities, and they built fortresses out of the ruins. But the real strike came not from above, but from within." Weeks earlier, human resistance fighters had infiltrated the Dominion's own fleet. Thousands of operatives disguised as prisoners of war or refugees had smuggled themselves onto the warships of the Crimson Armada. At the exact moment Erebus began to burn, they activated their plan. Sabotage teams detonated fuel cells. They disabled hangars. They hacked internal communication lines, making the Dominion believe they were under attack from their own. Panic spread like fire through a dry forest. On the command deck of the Dominion's flagship, chaos ruled. Officers screamed contradictory orders. Entire squadrons fired on each other, thinking they were compromised. The unstoppable fleet became a storm eating itself alive. And then came the moment that no one in the Dominion would ever forget. One of their captured dreadnoughts, the Vigilant Spear, rose out of Erebus's shadow under human control. The humans had turned the enemy's own weapon against them. With a roar that echoed through every channel of the system, they broadcast a single message: "You cannot kill what refuses to die." The dreadnought opened fire, not on Erebus, but on the Dominion fleet itself. The Crimson Armada fractured, commanders abandoned their posts. Ships tried to flee, but there was nowhere left to run. For 3 full days and nights, the Battle of Erebus burned across space and soil. The Dominion still outnumbered them, but humans didn't care about numbers. They cared about meaning. Every breath they took, every blow they struck, was a statement carved into history. When the sun finally rose over the shattered surface of Erebus, half the Dominion fleet was burning in orbit. The rest had fled. Humanity had held. They had no reinforcements, no grand strategic miracle. They had only one weapon, will, and it was enough. The fall of the Crimson Armada sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For centuries, the Dominion had stood unchallenged. But after Erebus, the myth cracked. Whispers spread among conquered worlds. If humans can stand, so can we. Slave colonies began to rise. Rebel banners unfurled across dozens of systems. Entire species who had lived in chains for generations suddenly felt something dangerous growing inside them. Hope. The Dominion tried to suppress the uprisings, but their armies were exhausted. Their soldiers feared not the enemy, but the idea of facing humans again. No one wanted to be deployed to a front where the enemy did not fear death. Within a year, the Dominion lost 30 star systems, not to armies, to inspiration. Humanity's willpower had become a contagion spreading across the stars, and still the humans did not build monuments. They did not sing songs of victory. Their leaders walked among ruins, carrying the names of the dead, not trophies, because they knew something the Dominion had never understood. True power is not about conquering. It is about refusing to be conquered. Galactic historians would later call it the Age of Unbroken Resolve. Dominion archives would refer to it as the collapse. But in human memory, it became something simpler. Erebus, a name whispered like a vow. I have read every log, every broadcast, every last fragment of what happened during those final years. And what strikes me most is not the weapons they built, nor the ships they stole. It is the choice to stand when there is no reason to. The choice to fight when victory is impossible. The choice to believe in something so fiercely that it terrifies empires. Humans are not the strongest species. They are not the fastest, nor the most advanced. But they possess a kind of madness that makes them unstoppable. Their bodies can be broken. Their cities can be burned. But their will, their unrelenting, unforgiving, burning will, is deadlier than any weapon ever forged. When the Dominion finally signed the surrender accords on the fractured moon of Leora, they did not look their human counterparts in the eye. Not because they were ashamed of defeat, but because they knew the truth. They had lost the moment the war began, because you can crush metal. You can silence fleets, but you cannot destroy a species that refuses to kneel. Centuries later, when children across liberated worlds ask why the Dominion fell, their teachers tell them one simple thing. Because they fought humans. And humans don't break. And I, the one who has studied the ashes, the broken warships, the final transmissions, will tell you this. In the end, the Dominion learned the most dangerous lesson in the galaxy. Human willpower is deadlier than any weapon.